We're very lucky and happy to have Carlos here as our speaker today. He was the city manager for Watsonville for many years, and prior to his selection as a city manager, he served as the deputy city manager and the assistant finance officer for the city of Watsonville. Prior to coming to Watsonville, he worked for the city of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and as a fiscal and policy analyst for the office of the legislative analyst with the California legislature. Mr. Palacios also worked as a program evaluator for Catholic Relief Services in Latin America and Africa, and he's going to ask me how I do all this. He has a Master's of Public Affairs from Princeton University, Bachelor of Business Administration from the University of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I welcome Carlos Palacios.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here this morning. And I wanted to tell you that, echo the comments of Stephanie about your organization being a force in California politics. And I know that I always look for your endorsement when I'm confused about a measure and saying, I don't know how to vote on this, right? And my nephew recently approached me and he said, I need your advice on what to vote on. These propositions are so confusing. And I said, I know, I'm confused too. And so I said, well, look at the League of California Women Voters. That's always a good organization. If they say vote for it, then you should just vote for it or vote against it. So you definitely are a force, and thank you so much. And so let me introduce myself a little bit to you. I spent more than 2 decades with the city of Watsonville, and for most of that time I was the city manager. And that's where I met with Watanka, and I worked with her. She was in our library, and she's a wonderful librarian there and does great work for the community. And when I got to Watsonville, I got there right after the earthquake, the Loma Prieta earthquake, right? And Watsonville was actually very devastated in the earthquake. For those of you who know the community, our downtown was completely devastated. And just like Santa Cruz's was, Watsonville's also its downtown. And in those days, the downtown was the economic driver for the whole economy of the city. Remember those days when we actually used to go downtown to shop, right? And now, of course, it's different. But in those days, that's what people did, and downtown was where the city got most of its revenues from. Most of its sales tax came from Forks department store right downtown, and remember that, and all those stores that were downtown, and they were gone in an instant. So that the city's major revenue source was in one instant was gone, and the downtown was gone. And then 30% of our housing was also uninhabitable. 30%, a third. People forget about that, but those of you who are around remember all the tents in Callahan Park and behind Freedom Boulevard, behind the county building and so forth. And so that's when I got there. And at that same time, there was also other things happening with the city. One of those was competition from overseas. Now, those of you who maybe don't remember, Watsonville at one time was one of the major frozen food capitals of the world. In fact, they used to call themselves the frozen food capital of the world. Bird's Eye, Green Giant, Smucker's, Watsonville Canning. There's just a whole group of major food processing industry there. It makes sense, right? You have all the ag land there, and you would have the factories that canned it or froze it. And what was happening is that due to competition from what at that time was mostly Mexico, although sometimes in Central America as well, they were losing business. And then NAFTA, I don't know if those of you remember NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, had a big impact as well. It served to, it was already happening, we were losing jobs overseas, but that sped it up. And so at that time, later there was a study done by the federal government, the General Accounting Office, that showed that there were 5,000 jobs that were lost in Watsonville alone due to the loss of the food processing industry. Now, in a town like Watsonville is about 55,000 people, and there's about 20,000 jobs, approximately. And so you can imagine, and this started in the mid-'80s, and it went through for about 10 years when we lost the food processing industry, from about early 1980s to mid-'90s. So during that time period, Watsonville lost a quarter of its jobs, 1/4, 5,000 jobs, 5,000 people unemployed. And these were folks who were Teamsters. I don't know if you remember, the Teamsters were a big force in Watsonville. Now they barely even exist. But at that time, all of these 5,000 food processing workers were members of the Teamsters. They actually got pensions, and they were earning $18, $19 an hour, some of them. They had vacations, they had full-time jobs, and they were unemployed. So you had all of these folks, 5,000 people, unemployed, and then the earthquake hits, right? You lose all your downtown, you lose a third of your housing stock, and so that's when I came to Watsonville. and that's when I became, that's when I became city manager, right then. And I remember one of the things I did at that time was talk to people about, what should the city be doing. I've always believed in that. I've always believed there's a lot of wisdom in the community. And I remember people just being so discouraged. There was just so much discouragement. Just, they couldn't see a way out, right? And so what we did is we started a strategic planning effort, because I realized that we had to mobilize the city government and the community to get on the same page about the same goals. And that if we worked together, we could achieve a lot. If we focused our efforts and we had everybody rowing in the same direction, we could achieve a lot. And so we did that. We started a strategic planning effort in the city. And of course, the first thing that came to everybody's mind was we need more jobs, right? We need economic development. I mean, we had lost, unemployment had reached, was annual average, was more than 26%. Annual average. Now, Watsonville has always had somewhat high unemployment because of the ag industry, right? It goes up and down. But annual average in Watsonville used to be 11 or 12% before the earthquake, before the loss of the food processing industry. And now we were annual average 26%. In the winter, it was going up above 30%, 35%. In the summer, it was going down, but only to like 17, 18% unemployment rate. So there was lots of unemployment, lots of folks that were struggling financially. So of course, when we did our strategic planning, there was a consensus. Everybody said, we need more jobs. We need to fill those 5,000 jobs we lost. We have to rebuild our downtown, create our new economic center so the city has an economic base and people have jobs. So that was clearly number one. And then there was other goals. There was probably about, I think we came down to about 5 or 6 overarching big goals, right? And so the next thing you do is after you set these big goals, and it's a multi-year strategic plan, right? So you're looking out 5 or 6 years, and you're saying for the next 5 or 6 years, these are our big goals, these 5 or 6 things. And number one was our need to create more jobs, economic development. And then what you do is you do what we call an operations plan, which takes those overarching goals and creates objectives. And says, okay, we're going to do specific projects, and we're going to work on them, and we're going to tie that to a 2-year budget. So we're going to do an operations plan that's 2 years, and we're going to have a 2-year budget. So the finances of the city are tied to the strategic plan by this operations plan with specific objectives, right? So the big goal was create new jobs, economic development. So what do we put in the middle? What are our objectives? Well, the first thing people said is let's attract new employers, right? We lost 5,000 jobs. Green Giant left, and Smucker's left, and Pillsbury left, and Watsonville County left, and Shaw's left. So we need new companies to come in here. Makes sense, right? Let's just bring new employers in. So we did that. We put some of our redevelopment resources towards attracting new businesses, and one of them, for example, was Fox Shocks. If you're a mountain biker and you want the best shock absorbers that there are, you get Fox Shocks. And they're actually manufactured in Watsonville. And there's 800 employees in Watsonville that make Fox Shocks in Watsonville. They came from the Bay Area. They were actually thinking of going out of state. They were going to go to Texas or something they were having trouble finding labor. And we found out about them, and they came, and it was a perfect match, and they came and located in Watsonville. But it was what we ran into, though, is a lot of employers said, we can't come to your city because the education level of your population isn't high enough. And in Watsonville, about half of our working age adults do not have a high school diploma. About 50% of the working age adults do not have a high school diploma. Now, in a city like Santa Cruz, only about 5% of working age adults do not have a diploma, high school diploma. So there was a big gap. And so when employers would come, they would look at those figures and say, how many of your population has a high school diploma? How much has a college diploma? And our rates were very low. And so they said, oh, we can't come here because we need a higher educational attainment for our workforce, because it's very technical. They have to be able to read and write and do arithmetic and all this stuff. So employers, we ran into a roadblock. A lot of employers wouldn't come. So we realized that very quickly, and we realized that educational attainment was key to our economic development efforts. And so what we did is we did something very unusual for a city, is we took our redevelopment money and we put it all into partnerships with Cabrillo College and with the Pajaro Valley Unified School District. Cities don't do that, right? They take redevelopment and get Costco to come, right? Or they get an auto dealer to come. You know, let's go get Toyota, and they'll bring them, they'll bring lots of sales tax. They don't take them and do that. So what we did is we partnered with Cabrillo College. I still remember talking to John Hurd, and who was the president at that time, and saying, we want you to build a satellite campus in downtown Watsonville, and we're going to pay for it. He said, wow, that's like a deal I can't refuse. And the city put its redevelopment money into a big chunk of our redevelopment money for many years, and that's why that satellite campus in Cabrillo College, downtown Watsonville, exists now, and that's why there's about 1,000 students that are going to school there all the time. We also helped the school district build the third high school. If you remember Pajaro Valley Unified High School, that's the third one. Remember, there used to be 2 high schools, Watsonville High and Aptos High, and that was the only 2, and they were very overcrowded. And the school district was trying to build a third, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't get it done, even though they had full funding from the state. The state of California was going to fully fund a high school for the Pajaro district, but they couldn't choose a site. Because every time they chose a site, the neighbors came out and said, we don't want a high school near us. There's traffic, there's litter, and there's noise, there's bells ringing, no. And so the school district, after going through a lot of effort, would choose a site, the neighbors would come out and they'd say, we can't do it. And so it was almost 15 years, the school district kept looking for a site. And every time they came, they couldn't decide on one. Despite having full funding, despite having 2 high schools that were grossly overcrowded, severely overcrowded, and they still couldn't pick a site. It was always 4-3 on every site, 4-3. So finally they picked a site, and it was the worst site you could pick. It was on the other side of the highway, in the coastal zone, next to a slough, in the middle of nowhere. And they said, that's our site. Because guess what? There's no neighbors. There's no neighbors there, right? So they picked the site, and they bought the site. There's no neighborhoods near it. It's off by itself. You got to cross the highway on this narrow bridge, and it's in the coastal zone. And so, of course, the Coastal Commission said, you're not going to build a high school there. And they said, well, we're building it there where you bought the site, and we have all the money. And so they were stuck. And so we knew that was impacting the educational attainment of our youth. So the city put a big chunk of its general fund money, not even redevelopment, into hiring planners to help the school district to get the high school through the environmental review process and through the Coastal Commission. I myself spent a year going to Coastal Commission meetings every month all across the state, meeting with Coastal Commissioners, with the superintendent, John Casey at that time, talking to Coastal Commissioners about this site and the need for it. Every month we would go drive to San Diego or wherever the Coastal Commission was meeting, And we'd go talk to different commissioners and explain, here's this high school and here's why we need it. After a year, they finally approved it. And after we spent more than $250,000 of our general fund on planners helping the school district. Now, interestingly enough, those were our objectives, right? So we had increased jobs, and we're helping the school district, right? And we're helping Cabrillo College. And strangely enough, when we brought those items to give $5 million to Cabrillo College and to give $250,000 to the school district, there wasn't any controversy because we had been talking about it for a year. Everybody knew why we were doing it. They say, we know why we need to increase our educational attainment. We knew that we have to do that before we can attract new employers, right? Otherwise, it would have been very controversial to take a big chunk of our money and give it to the school district, or take a big chunk of money and give it to Cabrillo College. But it wasn't, because we involved the community, people understood why we were doing it, and I remember both times it was approved unanimously by the council. There was wide support in the room, because again, everybody knew why we were doing it, how it fit into the plan, right? And so that was just one achievement. That high schools, the Cabrillo College, our water treatment plant in Watsonville. Watsonville is the only jurisdiction in the whole county with a recycled water treatment facility. We recycle a lot of water that's going for ag use. Over 2,000 acres of ag land on west of the highway is still in production only because of the water recycling plant. Before, we used to send all of our wastewater straight to the ocean, right? There was a pipe that just sent it out. Now it's all being recycled, and it's all being used for ag, to keep ag land in production. That was a goal in our strategic plan. We have a new city hall, a new library in Watsonville in our strategic plan. These were objectives, right? So when I look back at all the things we achieved in Watsonville, it was because we had long-term goals, we focused our resources, we got community input and support, and then we did it. Right? And so, I can go now to Watsonville, I can go walk around Cabrillo College campus, satellite, and I know that we did it because we got the community to agree to it and get behind it. And so now, when I became the county administrative officer, when I was going to apply for the job, I went and met with everybody I could think of, and I just had coffee with folks all over the county, and I would just grab people, I'd see them, and I'd say, hey, I want to talk to you. And I would tell them I'm going to apply to be county administrative officer, and I want to know what you think are the biggest issues facing the county. And it was the strangest thing that ever happened to me, because I've done that before in my prior jobs, and there's never been agreement, right? There's like 50 issues that people bring up. But here, in this county, there was one issue that everybody agreed to was absolutely the number one problem we have to face. Everyone I talked to, all over the county, from South County all the way to North County. What was the issue? Housing. See, even in here, everybody knows, yeah. Housing, everybody. And it was from activists, really progressive activists, to very conservative businessmen. And they all said the same thing, housing. It was the tourist industry, it was the manufacturing industry, it was the retail industry, it was the public sector. Everybody I talked to said, we got to do something about housing. We're in a crisis. We have to do something. So that was interesting to me. And then I asked, what was the second issue that people talked about that was pretty much, it wasn't a 100% consensus, but almost. Second issue. Transportation. Yeah. Traffic, right? It's so terrible right now, just to get around anywhere, any time of day right now. And so people said, traffic, we got to do something with transportation, we've got to do things. And then the third issue, the other two issues, there was not as much consensus, but they were both mentioned a lot. One was water. We have a water shortage that we have to address countywide, and that came up a lot. And then the other issue was our homelessness issue and mental health services that came up. And those two were very unanimous, that people brought up. And so I knew that there actually was a lot of consensus in the community about what we ought to be doing. But now, how do we organize the community to get their voice? And how do we get the Board of Supervisors to unanimously or as a group to endorse those goals? So we started Vision Santa Cruz County about 1 year ago. As soon as I became the county administrative officer, the first thing I told the board this, I said, look, if you hire me, here's what I'm going to do. And the first thing I do is strategic direction. We need to get the community involved, hear their voice, hear what their priorities are, and then we need to get in a consensus on the board level and the staff level about those issues. And then we need to focus our budget through an operations plan, a 2-year operations plan, and then do a 2-year budget. And so they liked that vision, and so we did it. So the first thing I did, almost a year ago now, it's been a year since I've been county administrative officer, we started our strategic plan, and guess what, we're finished. We just start getting ready to publish it. It's coming on Tuesday to the Board of Supervisors. It's called Vision Santa Cruz County. There's brochures as well, and there's on our website you can get it. It's a beautiful document, a lot of work. We had focus groups in each of the supervisor districts. We went out to the community. We went to farmers markets. We went to parents meetings, and we sent staff out to take surveys, and then we had an online survey as well. And we had over 2,500 people participate in our online survey as well. We had a lot of participation. It was really encouraging to see how much interest there was in it. And so it does have our very first strategic plan in the county. It has our vision, our mission, our values as a county government, and then it also has the overarching goals. And they vary from housing, of course, transportation, health and safety, and those are our overarching goals. And then next year, we're just starting right now. As soon as the board will hear this for the first time, the final document this Tuesday at its board meeting, and then next on the 27th of June, they will actually adopt it. It'll become our official strategic plan. Next year, we're going to start working right away on our operations plan. So this is a 6-year document meant to set goals for 6 years, and then we're going to bite it off in 2-year increments with an operations plan. And the operations plan now is going to get into specific goals. So if you go back to the example I gave you from Watsonville, Cabrillo College satellite campus will be one of the operation goal. That's an example of a project that we'll actually do. And so that's what we're going to be doing next year, is developing our 2-year operations plan with specific goals, specific projects. And then next year we'll also be adopting our first 2-year budget, which will be tied to the 2-year operations plan. So we'll put our resources. So just to give you an example, going back to what the Watsonville example was, we were creating jobs, increasing educational attainment through a partnership with Cabrillo. Putting $5 million was actually in the budget to Cabrillo College to help build our satellite campus. And so that's what we'll be doing with this, and we will be tackling the issues that there's a consensus on, I think we all know we need to work on. Our housing situation, our homeless and mental health. We have a lot of mental health issues that we're facing. Substance use disorder is a big thing. The opioid crisis is a big problem in our community, not only here but throughout the nation. But certainly we have our share, and it's a very severe problem that we're having with the opioid crisis. And transportation, preserving our environment. We all have very specific goals that we'll lay out in very specific projects. And that way the board will be on the same page, and the community will know now what we're working on. And we will be now next coming to you with actually specific projects to implement and achieve some of these goals. And so I'm very excited. I know staff is as well. And I'm glad that you folks have participated. And the one thing I would, in my final comments, leave you with is that right now people when I talk to people, it reminds me of when I came to Watsonville about housing and about the homeless situation, especially. People just seem so discouraged about like for example, talking to people about the homeless situation. People just seem so discouraged. I was meeting with a group of the hotel industry from the county and also from the city of Santa Cruz, and they were talking about how the homeless situation is actually impacting their business because people are not wanting to come here anymore because of there's so many homeless issues. And so they were saying, and they were showing me Yelp reviews, like they reviewed my hotel and the service is great, the location is great, but don't come, there's too many homeless around, and it's all this other stuff. And anyway, meeting with them, they just seem so discouraged. They're just like, there's just nothing we can do. It's just hopeless almost, And we were walking around in San Francisco last weekend, and I saw all the encampments on the street, and I know I talked to the folks up there, and they feel that same level of hopelessness, almost like being overwhelmed. Well, my message is we don't have to be overwhelmed. We don't have to be discouraged. Actually, we can solve this. We can. We just have to work very thoughtful. It's not magic either. There's no magic. All it is working hard at it, working thoughtfully at it, working smart, and we can achieve an amazing number of things. I'll give you an example at the county level. For years, we had a great discouragement about youth criminality, about youth in juvenile hall. And I remember we had so many issues, especially in Watsonville, with our youth involved in gangs and being sent to juvenile hall and reoffending, and then going to prison, and just this. And I remember there was this huge level, going back 20 years, of discouragement in the community about that. And I remember working on it, on criminal justice reform, and it's amazing what we have done in criminal justice reform. If you were to go to juvenile hall today versus 20 or 30 years ago, it's a completely different environment, completely different. And one of the differences is that there's half as many people in there. We've reduced even though we've grown, our population has grown significantly in this county. Our population in our juvenile hall has been reduced by more than half. And the people who go to juvenile hall, the rate that they reoffend has been greatly reduced. Because we've learned that if you provide counseling, if you provide job training, if you provide parenting skills, if you provide education, that you can get these kids out of the cycle. We know how, and we actually have great programs, and they've tested them to see which ones work. And we have been amazingly successful at reducing the amount of crime in the juvenile sector. First of all, the crime rate is way down. And the amount, when people do commit crimes, the rate that they reoffend is greatly reduced. By half. By half. So we can do this. But it's hard work. It's not easy, right? We're smart, we're thoughtful, we just have to focus our energies and then just go to work at it. And we will. I'm confident that in a decade we're going to make huge differences in our homeless population and in our the housing situation here in the county, as well as the issue of substance use disorder. I know we can make big differences. All right, that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention this morning. Did you want me to have questions? Okay, I would be happy to answer some questions. Yes, up here in the front.
The rate of they're going to have a mic. Wait for the mic. What's happened to the potentially new businesses and how they are reacting to the population and the education of young people in Watsonville? Has it increased exponentially?
Yes, Watsonville is doing very well right now. So Cabrillo College has been there more than a decade now, and as well as Pajaro Valley High School. So doing that, and then the school district has been doing some great work, and so they have attracted a number of new businesses. Annie Glass is one. Annie Glass is now in Watsonville, and Nordic Naturals is in Watsonville. I don't know if you know Nordic Naturals. They make vitamins and other things. They actually located in Watsonville. There's a number of new businesses. Watsonville is actually doing very well. The unemployment rate is under 10%, even in the ag community. In fact, right now they have a shortage of workers, in the ag industry, and the ag industry is booming, as you know. Their biggest challenge is water, of course, but even bigger than that is labor. They don't have enough workers. Yeah.
I'm curious to hear a little more about the plan for reducing homelessness and just addressing that problem of the homeless.
Yes.
You said that we shouldn't be discouraged. So I'd like a few more details on that if you have any.
Yes. Well, first of all, the homeless situation in California is actually worse than the rest of the nation. The rest of the nation does have homeless issues, no doubt, but it's worse here. And there's actually a very simple explanation for the main cause of homelessness. And it's just that we have not been building housing units in California. We have not been building. And so low-income housing units or more affordable housing units have just been converted or to higher rent, and we haven't been building new ones. And so what happens is you get a vulnerable population who are, let's say, an ag worker, right? Let's say somebody working in the ag industry. They're barely making it. And if they get an illness, if their car breaks down, if their spouse gets an illness, if their child gets an illness, any kind of little thing, and they can be homeless because there's no margin for error. And so one thing we absolutely just need to do is build more affordable housing units. If you just look at the number of low-income people in California and the number of affordable units that would be affordable to those folks, there's a huge mismatch. And so very simply, it's about, number one, building more affordable units, because that's our biggest problem. And then second, the issue is we have to deal with our substance use and mental health crisis. Right now, there is not enough mental health services, and we don't have adequate treatment for them. And so what happens is our jails are now being used as our mental health hospitals. When people are mentally ill, they're being arrested and they're taken to jail, and the jail has not been equipped to be a mental health hospital, right? And that is a nationwide thing. That's not just California. And that has to go way back about how mental health services were changed, going all the way back to the Reagan years. So it goes way back. And so we're dealing with all that fallout right now. The good news is that we are getting new resources through Medi-Cal, through federal Medi-Cal programs, and through the state to treat mental health and behavioral health and substance use, because often the substance use goes along with the mental health issues. So we're getting a lot more resources for the first time this year, more treatment beds, more psychologists, more psychiatric nurses, more outreach workers. So that's a good thing. We're getting better about that, but there still needs a lot of work to be done with the mental health services that the nation provides. The other thing we're doing is that we are looking about what about the severely mentally ill. Now these are the folks, when you see someone out, often they're yelling downtown Santa Cruz or something, or screaming. There has never been money for those folks. It's interestingly enough that if you look, treatment dollars were not focused on that population. And so we are starting to focus our efforts on that population, because it's actually a small percentage of the population, but they're in severe need, right? And so we need to focus a lot more resources on them. And so we're starting to do that this year as well. So I think these new programs that we're coming out with, and we're actually having budget hearings next week, and I think it's Wednesday, our Health and Human Services departments are going to be talking about the new programs we're going to be doing for both substance use disorder and behavioral health and the homeless population as well. So a lot going on. Yes.
Following up on the question of the homeless, I know that the cities in the county are hoping to provide accommodations for people that are homeless, but I haven't heard any plans about those homeless people who actually own a vehicle. Where are they going to stay? There seems to be no legal places for people to stay who own a vehicle. What would you do?
I know, in fact, right now there is conversations with some of the faith community, some churches that have been offered to use their parking lots for vehicles to park at night for people who are homeless but have a vehicle. And so I know that there are discussions right now with some churches about that. Now there's issues, right? Because it has to be monitored in some way. You have to worry about the neighborhood impacts. But I know that there's a discussion going on right now with the faith community about some churches making use of their parking lots for that purpose, of allowing people to park.
I just want to thank you very much for bringing all this information to us about what is happening in Watsonville, because what happens in Watsonville does affect very much the rest of the county. I happen to live in the county area, and there is one thing that seems to be coming up this time of the year, every year, and of course that's fireworks. I do have a dog, and many of my neighbors do. They're quite frantic when we have fireworks in our neighborhood. And it seems like a lot of them are maybe coming from Watsonville area, only, or at least so they say, because it is legal there, and in most of the other areas of the county it is not. So is there any chance that someday Watsonville might be able to make some changes in that particular issue? Thank you very much. Sure.
Luckily, I'm not the city manager of Watsonville anymore. But what's good, I believe it's good that the rest of the county does not allow fireworks. So they're completely illegal, but yet we still know that there's lots of fireworks on the 4th of July on the beaches, and they're totally illegal, and there's a big challenge. But no other city or the county does not allow fireworks. Watsonville's the only one in our county. In Monterey County, it's Salinas, and I think maybe Seaside, and I don't know if Marina does anymore. There's only a few left. It's a big controversial issue. I know that when I was in Watsonville as a city manager during the big fire, the years when we had those big fires here, the city, and we were in drought, the Watsonville City Council actually voted to temporarily ban fireworks for, I think it was a year or two that they did it. And the issue is that comes up is that a lot of the nonprofit groups raise money through those fireworks sales, and they're very dependent. And so it's a big it's their main fundraiser of the year, and so it's very difficult for the city council to know what to do. I know that Salinas actually banned, their council voted to ban the fireworks, and they banned them, and then the public did an initiative, and they put in the ballot, and they put them back on through initiative. And I will also say that the firework industry is a very powerful lobby, and that's another. And they come out with ads and all sorts of stuff. That's another thing. So I don't know what Watsonville's planning to do this year. I know that lately they've been allowing them again, and I know that they did try it one time, and it was a big fight. It was a very controversial, big fight, and they put them back on after about a year, I think. Yes.
I was curious if you had considered the issue of sea level rise and in the strategic plan and what and its effects on all the issues that you've been talking about.
Yeah, that's going to be sea level rise and global warming is a big issue for our county, and we definitely did take it into account, and we did hear people raising that as a concern. So we are. I know our Public Works is doing a survey right now of our facilities that are in the area that we're going to be impacted. I know the city of Santa Cruz is very active in that area too, and I'm sure Capitola is as well. So we're trying to do it through planning, through long-term planning about how we're going to deal with some of the sea level rise in our areas. Very difficult issue, very difficult, and there's some cases there's not a lot we can do, but there's certainly we can design our planning so that we're not making it worse, and we're definitely working on that. And I know it was an issue raised, and our Public Works is right now looking at doing a survey of all our public facilities that are going to be impacted, and we're coming up with a cost number of how much dollars it would take to fix those issues that are in the area that will be impacted by the sea level rise. All right. Okay, one more question.
Thank you. Hi, thank you. I have a question about just a general overview real quick on the concern of the cost of living in the county versus the wages from the employers, because I know a lot of people travel over the hill because of the cost of living in our county. they're traveling out of the area for job. Recently, there was an article that said you needed to have $70,000 a year minimum to successfully survive in Santa Cruz County. And yeah, that's a minimum, yeah. And so, the concern there is, especially with my children struggling, that's why I have 2 grown boys living at home.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we have a basic conundrum in this county in that our 2 main industries, which is agriculture and hospitality, tourism, those are our 2 main industries. If you look just at the number of jobs and amount of tax revenue, so forth, it's those 2 industries. They happen to pay very low wages. And so the hospitality industry pays minimum wage, the ag industry pays minimum wage, and we know that you cannot live here on a minimum wage, or it's very difficult to do, even with multiple family members. So that's a basic fundamental problem, right? Because our economy has been built around those 2 industries. And yet we live now in coastal California, one of the most beautiful areas of the whole world, and people want to live here, so the cost of living is going up. So I think there's a few things we need to do. One is we need to create a lot more workforce housing, affordable housing, because I think people who work here should have the ability to live here. And so we need to create much more affordable housing. That's one issue. The other issue is that we need to diversify our economy. And we need to get some of those higher wage jobs here. And in fact, they are coming to some extent. I know that we've had inquiries from over the hill, from tech industries, and there's some already here that are working here. In fact, I know that there's new companies that have come to City of Santa Cruz that are in the tech industry. So, and there's other industries besides just the tech that pay higher wages. So we do need to diversify our economy, create higher wage jobs here. So we diversify, we're not reliant on just 2 industries that are paying lower wages. But we also know that we need to create more affordable housing, because no matter what, we're never going to be able to create that number of high-level wage jobs. We're going to always have folks here who are not going to be able to afford that housing. And so we need, I know the school districts are really interested in building housing on school sites right now. They're working on it. It's very interesting for teachers. And I know that the county itself is looking at partnering both with other public sector jurisdictions and even some private sector about some affordable housing options for our own employees. We're looking at it right now as well. And so I think that's part of the answer.
As a follow-up, is there any plan to incentivize Is there any plan to incentivize the employers to pay higher wages because because of all the issues that we just spoke of?
Or service industry.
Yeah,
the service industry.
Yeah, there's no. I haven't heard anything that government's doing to create incentives for employers to pay higher wages. I haven't heard anything like that.
Incentives for everything else, right? We have incentives for moving here, incentives. What about wages for employees?
Right. I know the wage levels have been rising just because of the shortage of workers, but I haven't heard of anything in terms of government doing that.
Okay, thank you.
There's one other point that I think that doesn't address is that we are a bedroom community for Silicon Valley, and that takes up a whole chunk of housing.
Yes.
And takes it up, and also we are. They have second homes here, which they don't use during the week or month or year, and those things need to be addressed. Those are all fractions that have to be addressed.
Yes. I agree. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.